Most people imagine negotiation as a rational exchange. Each side presents its position. Both sides make concessions. Eventually, they meet somewhere in the middle. Chris Voss argues that real negotiations rarely work so neatly. People are emotional, defensive, inconsistent, and strongly influenced by fear, pride, status, and the need to feel understood. A person may reject a financially attractive offer because it feels disrespectful. A customer may resist a reasonable price because they believe they are losing control. An employee may refuse a compromise because accepting it would appear to reward unfair treatment. Logic matters, but emotion often determines whether logic will be heard. In Never Split the Difference, former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss explains how techniques developed for high-stakes crisis situations can be applied to business, work, and everyday life. During a hostage negotiation, simply dividing the difference is impossible. If a kidnapper demands $1 million and threatens to harm someone, offering $500,000 is not a meaningful compromise. The negotiator must uncover what the other person actually wants, reduce emotional tension, and influence decisions without creating stronger resistance. Voss argues that the same principle applies to ordinary negotiations. The visible demand may not reveal the true problem. A supplier asking for a higher price may fear unstable costs. A job candidate asking for more money may care more about flexibility, authority, or career development. A spouse arguing about one purchase may actually feel excluded from financial decisions. Successful negotiation begins with information. The negotiator listens for hidden fears, constraints, deadlines, and motivations. Instead of pushing immediately toward agreement, they create an environment in which the other person feels safe enough to reveal what matters. Voss calls his approach tactical empathy. Empathy does not mean agreeing with the other side or accepting unreasonable behavior. It means understanding the person's perspective and showing that you understand it. This lowers defensiveness and makes influence more possible. The book introduces practical tools such as mirroring, labeling emotions, calibrated questions, strategic silence, accusation audits, and the use of no as a source of security. It also explains why the word fair can be emotionally powerful, why apparent agreement may be meaningless, and why hidden information, what Voss calls black swans, can transform the negotiation. Some of these techniques can become manipulative when used only to control people. Their strongest use is not to trick the other side. It is to create a more accurate conversation in which both sides reveal enough information to reach a workable agreement. The book's central lesson is that negotiation is not mainly a battle of arguments. It is a process of listening carefully, managing emotion, uncovering hidden information, and helping the other person feel that the final decision remains partly their own. Blink 1. Tactical empathy is the foundation of effective negotiation. People become easier to influence after they feel understood. This does not mean they need to feel liked. They need to believe that the other person recognizes their situation, emotions, and concerns. Voss calls this tactical empathy. Ordinary empathy involves understanding another person's feelings. Tactical empathy adds a practical purpose. The negotiator identifies the other side's emotional experience, communicates that understanding, and uses the resulting connection to move the conversation forward. Suppose a manager must ask an employee to complete an urgent project. A direct command may create resistance. The employee may already feel overworked and unappreciated. The manager could begin by saying, "It sounds like you feel that urgent requests keep arriving without enough recognition for what you are already handling." This statement does not cancel the project. It shows that the employee's experience has been noticed. People often confuse empathy with agreement. Acknowledging that a customer feels mistreated does not mean the company accepts every accusation. Recognizing that a supplier is under financial pressure does not mean agreeing to every price increase. It simply removes the need for the other person to keep fighting to prove that their concerns exist. Tactical empathy requires genuine attention. The negotiator listens to tone, repeated phrases, hesitation, and emotional changes. They try to understand how the situation appears from the other side, even when that perspective feels unreasonable. Voss argues that ignoring emotion does not make a negotiation more rational. Unrecognized emotion continues influencing decisions from beneath the surface. Once it is named and acknowledged, people can examine the practical problem more clearly. Empathy is therefore not a soft alternative to negotiation power. It is a method for reducing resistance and gaining access to information that pressure alone may never reveal. Blink 2. Use a calm voice and make the other person feel safe. How something is said can matter as much as the words themselves. Voss describes several negotiating voices. The most useful in tense situations is the late-night FM DJ voice. It is calm, slow, and controlled. The negotiator speaks downward at the end of sentences rather than sounding uncertain or emotional. This voice communicates stability. When one person becomes agitated, the instinct may be to match their energy. Voices become louder. Speech becomes faster. Each side interprets the other's tension as aggression. A calm tone interrupts this pattern. It suggests that the situation can be handled and that there is no need for immediate panic. Voss also describes a positive, playful voice that can be effective in less confrontational situations. A warm tone encourages cooperation and makes difficult requests feel less threatening. By contrast, a direct or assertive voice should be used carefully because it can trigger defensiveness. Safety is essential because people reveal information only when they believe doing so will not be used immediately against them. A hostage negotiator cannot force trust through authority. They must create it through patience, consistency, and the absence of sudden threats. The same is true in a workplace or commercial discussion. If employees expect punishment whenever they mention a problem, they will hide information. If suppliers believe every admission will be used to reduce their payment, they will defend themselves rather than explain their actual constraints. Creating safety does not mean avoiding firmness. A negotiator can maintain clear limits while remaining calm. The objective is to remove unnecessary emotional danger from the conversation. When the other person's nervous system settles, curiosity and problem-solving become more possible. The first negotiation is often not over money or terms. It is over whether the conversation feels safe enough to continue honestly. Blink 3. Mirroring encourages people to reveal more. One of the simplest techniques in the book is mirroring. A mirror repeats the last few important words the other person has said, usually with an upward tone that invites explanation. Suppose a supplier says, "We cannot meet that deadline because our production schedule is already full." The negotiator might respond, "Already full?" The supplier is likely to continue. They may explain which orders are creating pressure, whether the problem concerns labor or materials, and what flexibility might exist. The mirror works because people are naturally drawn to clarify and expand their own words. It signals attention without interrupting with a long question or argument. Mirroring is particularly useful when the negotiator does not yet understand the situation. Instead of making assumptions, they encourage the other person to provide more detail. It also slows the conversation. People often rush to fill silence. After a mirror, the negotiator should remain quiet and allow the other person to think. That pause may feel uncomfortable, but it gives the technique its power. Mirroring can also reduce confrontation. If someone says your proposal is completely unrealistic, an immediate defense creates an argument. Responding with completely unrealistic invites explanation. The person may reveal that only one part of the proposal is causing concern. A broad rejection can become a specific problem. The technique should sound natural. Repeating every sentence mechanically will feel artificial and irritating. The negotiator selects words carrying emotional or practical importance. Mirroring is not impressive because it is complex. It is useful because most people speak too much when they should be gathering information. By repeating a few words and remaining silent, the negotiator gives the other person room to expose needs, fears, and possible solutions that might otherwise remain hidden. Blink 4. Labels reduce the power of negative emotions. A label identifies an emotion or dynamic without directly accusing the other person. Common openings include "it seems like," "it sounds like," "it looks like." Suppose a client is resisting a contract. The negotiator might say, It seems like you are worried that the implementation will create more disruption than the product is worth. The label gives language to the concern. If it is accurate, the client feels understood. If it is inaccurate, the client will usually correct it, providing better information. Labels are especially useful for negative emotions. Fear, suspicion, and anger often become stronger when ignored. Naming them can reduce their intensity. Voss compares this to turning on a light in a dark room. The problem does not disappear, but it becomes easier to examine. The wording matters. "You are angry" can sound like a judgment. It seems like this situation has been frustrating, creates more distance, and leaves room for correction. The focus remains on the experience rather than defining the person. Labels can also reinforce positive dynamics. It sounds like finding a long-term solution matters more to you than winning this one argument. This encourages the other person to identify with cooperation and long-term thinking. A good negotiator labels without immediately adding a solution. They make the statement and remain silent. The other person needs space to respond. Labels are not magic phrases. They fail when used without listening or when they are obviously designed to manipulate. The negotiator must be willing to discover that their interpretation was wrong. The deeper purpose is to make invisible emotion visible. Once both sides can discuss what is happening emotionally, they become less controlled by it. Blink 5. An accusation audit removes negative thoughts before they are used against you. Before entering a difficult conversation, people often imagine the worst things the other side may be thinking. They may believe you are greedy, unreasonable, inexperienced, selfish, or about to waste their time. The instinct is to avoid mentioning these negative possibilities. Voss recommends doing the opposite. An accusation audit lists the criticisms and fears the other person may hold and addresses them before they can become weapons. A consultant proposing a high fee might begin. "You may feel that this price is excessive, that we are asking you to take most of the risk, and that our company has not yet proved it can deliver a result worth the investment." This sounds dangerous because it introduces negative ideas, but the other person is probably already thinking them. Naming the concerns demonstrates awareness and reduces their emotional force. The listener may even respond by softening the accusation. They might say the price is high, but that they are more concerned about timing than capability. Now the real issue becomes clearer. An accusation audit is particularly useful when delivering bad news, asking for a major concession, or beginning a conversation in which trust is weak. It shows that the negotiator is not pretending everything is easy. This can create credibility. The technique also prepares the negotiator emotionally. By identifying likely criticism in advance, they become less defensive when it appears. The goal is not to insult yourself or surrender your position. It is to clear the emotional obstacles blocking the practical discussion. People often resist because they fear their concerns will be ignored. When those concerns are expressed accurately before they need to raise them, the conversation can move beyond accusation toward problem solving. Blink 6. No can create safety and improve the conversation. Most negotiators are trained to seek yes. They ask questions designed to gain agreement. Would you like to save money? Do you want this project to succeed? Can we agree that this solution is reasonable? Voss argues that forced yes answers often create discomfort. People feel they are being led toward a commitment. They may say yes simply to end the conversation, while privately planning to resist. No feels safer. It allows people to protect their autonomy and define what they do not want. Instead of asking, "Is now a good time to talk?" Voss might ask, "Is now a bad time to talk?" The other person can say no without feeling trapped, and the conversation begins with a sense of control. Questions can also be designed to invite a useful no. Would it be ridiculous to explore another delivery schedule? Have you given up on this project? Is it a bad idea to review the numbers once more? These questions reduce pressure and encourage the other person to think. A no is not necessarily rejection. It may mean the person needs more information, fears losing control, or disagrees with one part of the proposal. The negotiator can explore what the no protects. What about this does not work for you? What would need to change? Voss warns against confusing a polite yes with commitment. There are several kinds of yes. A counterfeit yes is used to escape or delay. A confirmation yes merely acknowledges a fact. A commitment yes leads to action. Negotiators should seek real implementation rather than verbal agreement. Giving the other person permission to say no often makes honest agreement more likely because the final yes no longer feels forced. Blink 7. Calibrated questions make the other side solve the problem. Calibrated questions are open questions designed to make the other person think about the problem from your perspective. They often begin with what or how. How am I supposed to do that? What are we trying to accomplish? How would this work in practice? What is the biggest challenge you face? These questions do not directly demand a concession. They invite the other person to consider constraints, consequences, and possible solutions. Suppose a client demands a major price reduction. Saying no may create confrontation. Asking, how can we provide the required level of service at that price, moves the burden of solving the contradiction back to the client. The question should be asked calmly, not sarcastically. The goal is not to embarrass the person. It is to make them confront the practical reality of their demand. Calibrated questions also create the appearance, and often the reality, of control for the other side. People prefer conclusions they help develop. When they explain how a solution could work, they become more psychologically invested in it. Voss advises avoiding why questions in many situations. Why did you do that? Can sound accusatory. What caused you to make that decision? Seeks similar information with less threat. Questions should guide rather than attack. The negotiator also needs to listen carefully to the answer. A calibrated question is not a disguised speech. It is a method of discovering how the other side understands the problem and whether they possess authority, flexibility, and genuine commitment. The strongest questions cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. They require the other person to think, reveal information, and participate in designing the path forward. Blink 8. Aim for that's right, not you're right. People often say, you're right, when they want a conversation to end. It sounds like agreement, but it may contain no real change. A frustrated spouse, customer, or employee may use the phrase to stop further explanation while remaining completely unconvinced. Voss prefers a different response, that's right. This occurs when the negotiator summarizes the other person's position so accurately that they feel fully understood. The summary should combine facts, concerns, emotions, and meaning. Imagine an employee asking for greater flexibility. The manager might say, "It sounds like you have continued meeting your targets, but the current schedule is creating unnecessary travel and making it harder to manage your family responsibilities. You are not asking to reduce your workload. You want the company to judge you by results rather than by where every hour is spent." If the employee responds, "That's right," the manager has reached a deeper level of understanding. The phrase confirms that the summary matches the person's internal story. This does not guarantee agreement on the final solution. It creates the foundation for a more productive negotiation. People become more open to influence after they no longer feel pressure to keep defending their perspective. A strong summary often includes labels and paraphrases built from careful listening. It should not be a strategic distortion designed to lead the person somewhere they never intended to go. The negotiator must represent the viewpoint honestly. The difference between "you're right" and "that's right" is the difference between surrendering politely and feeling accurately understood. Real influence begins after the second. Blink 9. Deadlines, fairness, and loss aversion strongly influence decisions. Negotiations are shaped by powerful emotional forces that may have little to do with the apparent value of the deal. Deadlines are one example. A deadline creates urgency and fear of loss. People may accept poor terms because they believe the opportunity will disappear. Voss argues that deadlines are often more flexible than they appear. The other side may face pressure too. Before making a major concession, negotiators should examine what will actually happen if the deadline passes. The word fair is equally powerful. People care deeply about being treated fairly, but each side may define fairness differently. Someone may say, "We only want what is fair," as a subtle accusation that resistance would be unreasonable. Voss recommends addressing fairness directly. "I want to make sure I'm treating you fairly. Please stop me if anything feels unfair." This reduces the power of the word as a hidden weapon. Loss aversion also matters. People are often more motivated to avoid losing something than to gain an equivalent benefit. A customer may respond more strongly to the risk of losing a discount, opportunity, or existing advantage than to a promise of future gains. Ethical negotiators should understand these forces without manufacturing false threats. Fake deadlines and artificial scarcity may produce short-term agreement, but damage trust. The broader lesson is that decisions are not based only on objective value. Timing, perceived fairness, fear of regret, and the possibility of loss can shape behavior more strongly than spreadsheets. A skilled negotiator listens for these emotional pressures and prevents them from silently controlling the outcome. Blink 10. Black swans and implementation details determine the real deal. A negotiation usually contains important information that neither side has revealed. Voss calls these unknown factors black swans. A black swan may be a hidden deadline, an internal conflict, a personal motivation, an outside alternative, or a constraint that completely changes the situation. A company may claim price is the main issue when the real concern is that an executive needs the project completed before a board meeting. A seller may appear inflexible because they need enough money to solve a specific personal problem. An employee may threaten to leave not because of salary, but because they feel invisible to leadership. These facts can transform the negotiation once discovered. Black swans are found through careful listening, face-to-face observation, and curiosity about statements that do not fit the visible story. Voss recommends paying attention to unusual wording, emotional reactions, and inconsistencies. The negotiator should also confirm who actually has authority. The person saying yes may not control implementation. An agreement is meaningless when the people responsible for carrying it out are unwilling or unable to do so. This is why Voss repeatedly asks how questions. How will the agreement be implemented? How will success be measured? What happens if a problem appears? How will the other side explain the deal internally? The negotiator can also look for repeated confirmation. A single yes may be politeness. Several consistent answers, supported by practical details, provide stronger evidence of commitment. The final agreement should leave both sides with a realistic path to action. Negotiation does not end when someone says yes. It ends when the promised behavior actually occurs. The hidden information and implementation process often matter more than the visible terms that received most of the attention. Key takeaways from the book. Never Split the Difference argues that negotiation is driven as much by emotion and hidden information as by logic. Its core tools include tactical empathy, mirroring, labeling, accusation audits, calibrated questions, and giving the other person room to say no. The goal is to uncover what truly matters, reach a genuine "that's right," and confirm how the agreement will actually be carried out. The book's central lesson is that effective negotiators listen more carefully than they argue and influence people by making them feel understood, safe, and involved in the solution.